morning, class. Today we're going to begin with chapter 3. But before we get started, here are some of the expectations that you all have from the class. You said that you wanted to learn about what precautions to take when opening a new business, for example, legal contracts and so on. What strategies and techniques would be recommended, and specifically focusing on real estate. You also wanted to talk about, just in general, strategies for small entrepreneurship, and specifically learn more about the business plan, what channels of distribution we have available, overcoming challenges, and so on. And finally, financing. How do we get financing for our small business? So those were some of the expectations you listed. And we will indeed be talking about all of them in the semester. Some of them we may not be able to focus as much time. For example, I know that in the channels of distribution, one or a couple of you were interested in e-commerce, and we will touch on that, but we won't spend a lot of time on it. Having said that, there is a lot of experience in the class. You all have experience in corporate, small business, nonprofit, regarding the industries. You have experience in telecommunications, retail, service, education, sports. In essence, there is so much experience and knowledge in the class. And what we need to do is we need to pool your knowledge, because part of the experience in a master level class is to be able to learn from each other. Share your knowledge, but also read your classmates' answers, because we are going to learn a lot from each other. All right, enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump into the chapter. We are jumping on chapter 3, which is all about how to generate a new entry, or actually how to generate the idea for a new entry. So let's start with a new entry. What is a new entry? Well, new entry in this course refers to the new offering of a product or service, whether it be in a new or existing market. Now, many times I'll refer to the new entry as the product, but just know that it could be product or service. It is said that a goal without a plan is nothing but a dream. So what do we need to do in order for our dream or our goal to become a reality? What should our plan take into account? We need a strategy to launch an offering into the market. To begin with, we do have an advantage, and that is that just from the name, new entry, the advantage is that it's new. On the other hand, newness can have some costs, some disadvantages, and we'll talk about that as well. Talking about costs, whenever we launch our product, we need to be able to minimize the costs. Many times, small businesses get excited, they're so enthusiastic, and they might end up spending more than is necessary at launch, and then sometimes take on a large amount of debt. And debt is okay as long as there is return on that investment, right? Our overall strategy needs to include the following elements: generating a new entry, exploiting it, and then, of course, making sure that we establish a feedback loop. The success of our new entry will depend on several factors. Our strategy, how well we did in reducing our risks. How do we know what risks are we going to have? We do an analysis for that. And then, of course, it's also going to depend on our organizational structure, the competence that is in our team. So at the beginning, I talked about how much knowledge there was in the class. So we are a team, and so our success is going to depend on the quality of that team, right? On sharing the knowledge. Same thing happens in a new small business. As new entrepreneurs, sometimes we put so much effort on creating the business plan. We spend so much time on it, and once we launch the product, it feels that we're done. We launched, let's celebrate. And yes, it is time to celebrate. However, it is important to make a feedback loop. And the feedback loop needs to be pre-planned. We need to already plan to do this, because if we don't, we might just skip it, and that may be our downfall. If you look at the flow chart, you can clearly see the 3 stages that we talked about: generation, exploitation, and feedback loop. Stage 1 has the elements that we discussed in chapter 1. Pulling together our knowledge, resources to put together a potential offering. And once we assess it and select our product, we get into the second stage. Here's where the launch strategy is put into place with the 3 elements mentioned in the last slide: entry strategy, risk reduction, and organization. Once the venture starts to perform, it's launched. Now it's time to put the 3rd stage into gear. And that means going back to the beginning. Talking about our knowledge. What did we learn? What knowledge did we gain from launching? What other resources do we need? How well our resources did? How does that change our offering then? So now we go back into assessment. What do we need to change? How should we change our strategy? And so on. And then you implement the changes. You tweak the things that you needed to tweak. You launch those tweaks, and then it goes back to the beginning. You need to start with the feedback loop again. Now, talking about the beginning of the new entry. Our offering is a distinct resource bundle that came as a result of the knowledge, resources that we put into it. But what does resource bundle mean exactly? Here in the phrase resource bundle is what makes it distinct. Because it's not just one resource, right? It's a bundle. And that bundle of resources, meaning the product itself, the strategy that went into it, the people that are behind it, the resources that are behind it, the salespeople, if there are salespeople, all of that makes together the bundle. So when you think about, let's say that you want to sell t-shirts, or you are going to start a business based on technology and you're going to be creating a certain app. It's not just about the app. It's not just about the t-shirts. Rather, it's about the bundle, the whole thing. So how is the app being advertised? Who is your help desk that is going to help the customers, and so on? So it's the bundle. That's what makes it valuable, rare, and inimitable. Valuable if it enables the firm to pursue opportunities, neutralizes threats, and offer products and services that are valued by the customer. Because I can put together a wonderful product that I think is wonderful, but if people don't see the need, then it's not going to work. A product bundle is rare when few or no competitors have it. And so let's say that we have a t-shirt and we can say, oh, well, I guess that's not rare. But it could be because you are the one that is launching it and no one else is you. And you may be better at selling t-shirts than anyone else, right? And you may have a better team, and you may have better designs, and so on. So the product can be made rare when you think about it in terms of the bundle itself. Inimitable, when replicating this bundle, is difficult, or it's costly for competitors. Maybe it is a YouTube channel. In this specific YouTube channel that teaches kids about school subjects, this is small kids, the teacher is Mr. Chowinski. Mr. Chowinski has a cat by the name of Whiskers. And so Mr. Chowinski involves Whiskers in the mentions, actually not involves him, but mentions Mr. Whiskers. And every time that Mr. Whiskers is brought in, it brings a smile into the kids' faces. Now, Mr. Whiskers makes it unimitable because other channels may be able to come up with the content, but they cannot clone Mr. Whiskers. Now, how do we put together a resource bundle? Knowledge is key. From experience, I will tell you that you are infinitely better getting into an industry you already know a lot about. And if you don't, make sure you get deep knowledge first. So the experience that you have is unique to each entrepreneur and the team. Nobody else has the experience that you have. Nobody else has the experience that your team has as a bundle. And then, of course, technological knowledge and market knowledge. Both types of knowledge can exist in your brain, but also in the collective brain of your team. For example, biking enthusiasts were the pioneers of the mountain bike. It wasn't the company Schwinn that is so famous for bicycles. They are not the ones that came up with the mountain bikes. It was biking enthusiasts. What did the biking enthusiasts have that Schwinn didn't? Well, they had market knowledge. They had intimate knowledge about the needs of somebody who takes their bike into the mountains or the hiking trails. And that knowledge, information, technology, know-how, or skills gave those mountain bikers a unique perspective into their market. So we're talking about deeper knowledge than just market research, because anyone can do market research. In fact, I'm sure that Schwinn did their market research. But this is knowledge of the market that has those deep insights that the bikers knew because they went to the mountains day in and day out, or every weekend. They knew exactly what was needed. And so without this knowledge, opportunities may go unnoticed. We're going to talk more about technological knowledge, but innovations don't need to be huge, world-changing, right? There could be small tweaks. And so technological knowledge is the entrepreneur's knowledge, skills, know-how to advance knowledge, okay? Because, like I said, it doesn't mean a complete departure of the knowledge that already exists. It could be just something that advances the knowledge that already exists. Now, let's say that we put together a resource bundle. How do we assess the new entry opportunity? For this, the entrepreneur will consider the prior knowledge and results of an information search. So, the entrepreneur will do their homework and figure out, okay, what do I know until now about my product or offering? Where am I in the cycle of this trend, perhaps? So, is there a window of opportunity that is just opening? Or am I at the end of that window? And am I willing to risk an error of commission or an error of omission? Willing to risk an error of commission is when the entrepreneur decided to act and enter the market, only to realize that the decision wasn't right, it wasn't the right time. So they made an error, they actually launched it and it was wrong, the wrong decision. An error of omission, on the other hand, occurs when the entrepreneur decided not to act. Said, no, this is not the right time, only to find out that he or she missed on a great opportunity. To summarize, search and knowledge together lead us to a certain level of information of the new entry. Then we have the window of opportunity. Is it still open? And then our preference for error, omission or commission, lead us to a certain comfort with a decision. And so all of those three, the level of information that we have, whether the window of opportunity is still open, and how comfortable we feel with making a decision under the uncertainty, because there will always be risks, those three are considered for the go or no-go decision to exploit our new entry. Now, when we go into a new market, we may be first to the market with our product, and that is called the first mover entry strategy. Maybe nobody else has this product. We are the first ones. This, being the first mover, has some advantages. And so first mover advantage refers to that competitive edge that a company or entrepreneur can gain by being the first. First movers can establish market leadership and brand recognition. So being the first makes you a pioneer, and that makes you a market leader. This can lead to strong brand recognition because you are the first and the only one that did this for a while. And so anybody else who comes in later will have to overcome your name, your brand recognition. Also, economies of scale. First movers can often achieve economies of scale by setting up really efficient production and distribution systems from the start. Customer loyalty. Also, if you're the first to market, early customers tend to develop brand loyalty because they have no prior experience. They have no alternatives to compare their experience to. And so once they're with you, they might not be willing to leave you for something that they don't know. First movers also have the opportunity to build proprietary technologies, processes, and know-how. And this can be difficult for competitors to replicate. So you'll be the first one that gets the experience. And this know-how that you have and your competitors don't will make it harder for them to get into the market and catch up. We can also talk about network effect. So some products and services become more valuable as more people use them. Think about social media platforms, for example. So the social media platforms with more customers, they have a larger base. They have the effect that people don't want to leave them because everybody's in that platform. So for a while, this was the case with Facebook, right? Everybody was on Facebook, so nobody wanted to leave. Then it was Instagram, then maybe Snapchat, now it's TikTok, and so on, right? Resource advantage. Being the first means that you have a head start in terms of selecting the resources that you need, getting that talent that you require, and so on. And so again, that makes it harder for the competitors, because when they start entering the market, by that time, perhaps you'll have already selected the best resources, the best talent, the best channels of distributions, and so on. Regulatory and legal barriers. Well, you can influence the regulatory environment to your advantage. So for example, let's say that you create an app. You can ensure a patent and intellectual property rights so that nobody else can do what you're doing. And then the learning curve. Being the first means that you'll be ahead of everyone else in terms of knowledge. A good example of a first mover would be Amazon. Amazon was founded in 1994, and Amazon started actually as an online bookstore. That's all they did, books. They started from out of a garage. But later, it evolved into what it is now, which is they sell absolutely everything. So Amazon was the early entrant. They entered the market when the internet was still relatively new. And so that had its advantages because Bezos, the founder, recognized the potential of e-commerce. Now, it had disadvantages as well, but we'll talk about that in the next slide. Amazon did amazingly well on that feedback loop. They kept on changing things. So they started on a loop of continuous innovation. And then they were the market leaders. They have the network effect. All in all, what Amazon did really well was to continuously adapt to changing market conditions. So they kept their first mover advantages. And what happens today? Well, as we know, Amazon is one of the most valuable companies globally. However, there are disadvantages as well of being the first mover. There are risks of failure because when you're entering a market, there's so many uncertainties because nobody else has done it before that things might not unfold the way that you expect them to. And so this might bring you higher costs that you anticipated. Costs in terms of research, market education, because people don't know about your product. The other thing that could happen is that competitors might imitate you because being a first mover reveals an opportunity, right? So after Amazon launched, other people might have thought to themselves, I could do the same thing. And then changing customer preferences is another disadvantage because perhaps you invest so much on your product, on educating the customers, only to realize later that customer preferences have changed. An example of this would be BlackBerry. For a while, everyone wanted a BlackBerry phone, right? They were secure, they were really reliable. However, later, customers' preferences changed. They didn't want the keyboard anymore. They wanted a touch screen. So at that point, BlackBerry had to change their entire strategy. And we know how that ended. They weren't very successful, unfortunately. An example of a first mover that faced disadvantages also would be Webvan. They were an early entrant and they were one of the earliest companies to attempt online grocery delivery. Now, online grocery delivery is everywhere, right? H-E-B has it, Costco and Walmart, everyone's doing it. But back then they were the first ones. They were faced with many challenges. They had infrastructure costs. They spent so much money on building warehouses. They had to spend so much money on systems to automate. And unfortunately, they also had to face low adoption from customers. It was really hard for customers to change their mindset of I'm going to the grocery store to I'm going to order everything online. So unfortunately, all of the disadvantages that the company faced led to the company closing in 2001. So now that we know this, how does one make a decision as to enter the market or delay entry? So it's a balancing act. On the left side, you have first mover advantages, and on the right side, you have first mover disadvantages. First mover advantages are cost advantages, less competition, you can secure channels, you're in a prime position to get customers' loyalty, and of course, you're gonna get so much experience from being that first mover. On the other hand, you have environmental instability because you don't know what the market's going to do, customer uncertainty because they might not be educated on your new product and you might need to spend some money on it, and then you have short lead time. When considering entry into a new market, entrepreneurs and businesses face various types of uncertainties. Demand uncertainty, and that refers to the difficulty to estimate the demand of your product. It involves not knowing how much demand exists for a product or service or how it might change over time. And if there is high demand uncertainty, then disadvantages outweigh advantages. So you have to know enough about the demand uncertainty for you to be able to launch your product. Let's say that I want to open a school to teach drums. Or actually, let me change that. Let's say that I want to open a business for drum circles and I live in Kerrville. Is there a demand? Am I certain there is a demand for drum circles in Kerrville? Is it a new product in Kerrville? How is the economy? What about the social and cultural factors? Are there any competitors that are already doing drumming circles? If I am unsure of these factors that will influence demand, then disadvantages outweigh advantages and I will be more likely to not enter the market. So we discussed how being a first mover can have advantages and disadvantages. There could be, when you're a first mover, customers' uncertainty. What can we do to decrease customers' uncertainty? Customers' uncertainty refers to people not knowing whether they should get into your product or not. As in the example of Amazon. Should I order something via Amazon? I'm not so sure. What could we do if you are the business owner to reduce this uncertainty? Because when something is super new, the customer may not know what to compare it to. You could educate the customers, you can do demos, you can document, you can offer manuals, you can offer tutorials. And if you're not sure, you can always delay entry. An example of a first mover successfully managing customer uncertainty was Apple's iPhone launch in 2007. What did they do to manage customer uncertainty? Well, we know for sure they had an innovative concept. It was groundbreaking. It also had technological uncertainty, by the way. It combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet communication device into one. What they did was they built anticipation. So even before they launched, they had a pre-planned, orchestrated launch. So months before it actually launched, Apple was doing keynote presentations, media coverage, and so they started working on that buzz. Their messaging was very clear. They talked about simplicity, how user-friendly it was. And so this was all meant to calm customers' uncertainty. In their stores, they had people that were ready to educate. Even to this day, they have classes that they do for people that want to learn to use their devices. And another thing that Apple did is they did a gradual launch. So they had an exclusive deal with AT&T Another thing that being a first mover does is it gives you lead time. And that again has advantages and disadvantages. It could help you build customer loyalties. You can build switching costs, right? That's what in wireless, in the mobile industry, that is what companies did really well. They would get you into these contracts, and when you wanted to switch, either you had to pay off your contract or stay. It also allows you to protect your uniqueness because you have that time when you have no competitors yet, or the competitors are way behind you. And you can also secure important sources of supply and distribution. An example of a company that leveraged lead time advantages was Dell. So Dell implemented a direct-to-customer approach where the customer could customize everything they wanted in their computers. And Dell took the advantage of their lead time and built in switching costs because Dell would sell the computers via financing. They would finance the computers. So therefore, those customers were with them until they paid the computers. Then they gave them also a line of credit if they were paying their computers, and then they would get computers or printers for their children and so on. So that's one of the things that they did really well, is they just kept the customer locked into a financing contract. The other thing that they did is that they established early relationships with suppliers, and so therefore their supply chain management ran really smoothly, and that was really hard to replicate by their competitors. Okay, so now let's talk about risk reduction strategies. So one of the strategies that you will need to decide is a market scope. Is your strategy going to be narrow scope or broad scope? Narrow scope is when you offer a small product range to a small number of customer groups. A broad scope strategy is when you offer a wide range of products to a large customer base. If you select a narrow scope strategy, that means that you can have more knowledge of your niche market and of your selected number of products. But the disadvantage is that if market demand doesn't pan out, or if it changes, then that's a risk that you should be willing to take. On a broad scope strategy, it means that your base of customers will be much larger. However, with this strategy, you will also need more resources, so you might need more capital. Another way of reducing the risk is an imitation strategy. When you go on an imitation strategy, that of course is easier than being a first mover because you can lean on the first mover's learnings. So you can do research on what they did really well. A franchise would be an example of imitation strategies. Being a franchisee for McDonald's, for example, will provide you organizational legitimacy because everybody knows McDonald's and they already know they have a formula of what works. So that limits your risks. Another strategy to reduce risks is managing newness. We already talked about this with Amazon and how they educated their customer base on e-commerce, and Apple, iPhone 7, iPhone 2007, and how they educated their customer base. Another example would be GoPro. Back in 2002, GoPro introduced a line of action cameras. Nobody else had dedicated cameras designed specifically for capturing action-packed moments. They had a niche target audience, narrow scope. Their niche audience was adventure seekers, sports enthusiasts, and outdoor adventurers. And so that allowed them to focus their efforts. They also were able to leverage user-generated content. They also put together a suite of accessories that could go with GoPro. In essence, they were able to identify a unique market gap. They created a product that was targeted to a narrow scope market for an underserved audience. And they did really well with marketing, leveraging their own customers' videos. In sum, in this chapter we talked about the new entry, we talked about entry strategy and risk reduction strategy, and how together with the organization that can be managed for the venture to succeed, and the importance of the feedback loop. Alright, that's it for this chapter. Until the next one. Bye!